Before we dive in, a quick note. If you want weekly tools to grow and lead your business, sign up for my free newsletter at stevebreda.com/newsletter. Good day, Steve Breda here with the Management Blueprint podcast. And today my guest is David Jones, the CEO and partner of Mercer Assessment, focused on providing defensible human capital insights and foresights in the fields of talent acquisition, leadership development, and organizational productivity. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. Great to be here.
Well, excited to have you here, especially because you're the first guest, maybe not completely from the Middle East, because we had a couple of guests from Israel, but definitely from Dubai, where you are. And maybe that is also impacting the answer that you're going to give to my question. So here is my first question. What's your personal why, and how are you manifesting it in your business, Mercer Assessment?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think obviously a lot of skills around resilience and being able to think about how you maintain your own personal well-being, but also well-being of the workforce is, I think, something which has come to the fore in the last couple of weeks for sure, living in Dubai. But I think very much my North Star by educational background, I'm a labor market economist. And although I've worked in HR and talent management for pretty much all of my career, I think I'm always thinking about how to make markets more efficient. And I think the labor market in some ways and what it takes to become efficient is very similar to a fish market or to a stock market or to any other market that you can think of. What you need to be able to make the best decisions is you need really good data, really good up-to-date information, both on the supply side and on the demand side. And I think a lot of what we do at Mercer Assessments and a lot of what we do in talent management more generally is really about trying to do that, trying to help individuals understand what their strengths are, trying to match them to specific careers that will be more fulfilling for them in the long term, and also help them to be more productive for their employers, as well as helping employers to understand what are the important skills for today, for tomorrow, how they can predict how people will perform in certain environments. So really trying to bring this supply side and demand side together. I think notoriously labor markets have very bad information. Typically, most people get their career guidance from their parents or their grandparents, which can be great for aspiration, but doesn't always necessarily keep them up to date in terms of what's happening in today's workplace. So I think this is really my anchor, if you like, where a lot of what we do in our innovation or in our technology or in our engagements with clients typically comes back to this point. Fundamentally, how do we make labor markets more efficient and more functional for all of the stakeholders?
Yeah, that's fascinating. So would you say that if you are doing this well, then more people will feel fulfilled in the roles that they work in?
I mean, I think that's definitely the aspiration, right? That's definitely what you would hope to do. And I think as individuals, I'm sure we can all think of those really, really great days where you think that you nailed it at work and you think that, you know, this is something where you can make a really specific contribution and it just feels good. And all those people around you have the benefit of that. And it becomes sort of something which is infectious for those around you. And I think it's important for the economy on a macro level, right? I think if we are able to provide opportunities, provide career paths, help people to understand, you know, what their unique strengths are, then this is something which helps to promote productivity and positivity more generally, right? And the individual, the team, the family level, societal level, I mean, it affects all sorts of dimensions.
So maybe this is kind of a side question, but I'm really wondering, is this AI revolution as we're going through, is this influencing your work and is it changing the requirements of employers?
Yeah, I think we're in a very interesting time. I mean, I'm not a futurologist. I'm not a prophet. I'm not somebody who makes these sort of big predictions about the future. But I think the case for AI to some extent is still unproven in terms of what it's actually delivered to date. I mean, I think there's obviously a lot of investment. There's a big impact on the environment, but I don't think we've had, you know, something which is really groundbreaking discovered by AI at this point. that's new. It seems to be quite backward looking in many ways, based on ingesting data from, all the novels that you have on your shelf, that I have on my shelf. Maybe they're going to ingest this podcast in the future. I don't know. It doesn't seem that there's been a unique breakthrough that humanity has not been able to, or would not be able to achieve by itself. And yet, I think the promise and the anticipation of what AI can do is quite compelling, right? And I think the way that it's impacting the labor market, especially, right? I think ironically, it's impacting probably software developers the most today. And it's interesting that a lot of people in the white collar field, professionals, maybe are also feeling like it's changing the way they're working. And so there's a big debate, I think, about, is it going to be an augmentation, or is it going to be a replacement of some sort of tasks? I think one thing you can say with certainty is I think that the concept of a job is definitely going to change. And if you look at the roots of the words, the etymological roots of the word job in the English language, then it literally means a task rather than a role as such.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to get this more atomization of people's roles. What used to be bundled together as one job is now going to be much more atomized into specific skills, specific tasks. The opportunity there is that we all get to do more of the things that we find more fulfilling, and less of the repetitive, dangerous, or dull types of things that we have to do in our jobs sometimes. But I think it has some second order impacts in terms of how people develop their careers, and the competence and the confidence that people, particularly when they're junior in their job, need that time to be able to build that type of ability to operate at a higher level. So I think we're all going to have to be leaders in lots of ways, even leaders in our own work.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's fascinating. So David, let's talk about the framework. So what would be a framework? Think of something that allows you to be more effective in your job, something maybe that you personally discovered or your colleagues you developed, something that helps you be more effective in creating those labor market matches, finding the right candidates, assessing them, something that you can describe in 3 or 4, 5 steps, or maybe 3 or 4 ways of looking at things. Anything that comes to mind?
So there are a few things. I did dismiss a few things because I think, I don't know if you've heard the news, we're recording this. I think the British Prime Minister has just resigned today. And this is, I think, our 7th Prime Minister in 10 years. And I'm sure each one of those Prime Ministers has had their own framework, in terms of, what they wanted in terms of their political leadership, and, how they were going to operate in government. So I think we're definitely operating in a much more VUCA world, right? This mnemonic about being volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think to some extent that means that having a framework has to be something which is constantly being amended or being reviewed in many ways and updated. A lot of what we do in assessment, we have very clear statistical frameworks where we look at particular behaviors or particular characteristics, and we try to make sure we measure that. But I thought maybe that was too detailed and too comprehensive. So one of the things we do in engaging with our clients is we have a sort of consulting approach with our clients. It's like a cycle. So we start off with reviewing the situation. So it's like a situation appraisal, if you like, and we use this internally as well in Mercer Assessments. So trying to understand, what's happening, what's going well, what are we concerned about, just trying to get any data or information that we can. Then I think it's important to, particularly with a team or with the client, to explore what the priorities are, what's important, what is causing them sort of the most thought or the most energy in terms of trying to address that. So reviewing, exploring, and then agreeing course of action. So making sure that there's consensus, or making sure that if you're in an organization, you've got the budget and you've got the endorsement from the headquarters or from the senior management. And then I think you can then go into a planning stage. So making sure then you've got a focus on execution, making sure that you know what has to happen when. And then I think you can then go into the ability to sort of have that as a cycle, and then review or evaluate the plan itself. Is it on track? Is it on time? Is it on budget? Is it achieving its objectives? And you can continue on this sort of reflexive cycle. So if you were to do that, it sort of becomes quite sinister. I think the mnemonic becomes Reaper, like the Grim Reaper, or like reap what you sow, because you review, explore, agree, plan, execute, and then review again. So it can become sort of like hopefully a virtuous cycle, but it can become a sort of ongoing process.
I love it. So is it review, refine? Maybe the last one is refine, and then you avoid repeat.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, love it. So basically, what you're looking for is helping your customers with an initial problem, and then help them generally improve their organization by keep refining and adding and kind of making it better over time.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So it turns out to be a recurring engagement.
Yes, that's the hope as well. Yeah, I mean, there's hopefully if you have that relationship with the client and also with your team, right, that you have this ability to recognize what you've achieved together, but also you can plan what you want to do differently next time.
So you're the CEO of Mercer Assessment, which is the Dubai operation. Is this just a geographic branch of the Mercer Group, or is it a separate business that operates in multiple geographies?
Yeah, so actually it's a new venture for Mercer globally. So actually, my background is I was one of the founders of a company called the Talent Enterprise, which was acquired by Mercer just over 2 years ago. And it had also made an acquisition of another company previous to that called Metal. So we were more of like a talent assessment type of company. So we would do talent acquisition, talent development, leadership development, things like high potential identification, succession planning, these types of applications. Employee engagement as well, things like employee well-being assessments, stuff like this. The psychometric assessment field. So if you or your listeners are good on Greek, you would know psychometric means measurement of the mind. Yeah, right. So this is really what we're trying to do, and we're accredited by the British Psychological Society to say that the tools that we have or we use or we develop have validity, have reliability, and are statistically stable within the sort of bounds that you would expect for measuring human beings. It can never be perfect, but it's considered to be predictive. And Metal were more focused on skills assessment, was one of their big areas to focus on, and educational assessment. So coming together as Mercer Assessments, we're now a part of this big global organization, and we're now working. Though we're based in the Middle East, we're working in Asia, in Europe, North America. We're just starting to do more work in North America, Australasia. So this is the sort of big, hairy, audacious plan that we have.
That must be pretty intense if you're working around the clock, essentially working around the globe. Then Mercer,
it can be. Yeah, it can be. Yeah, I mean, even working in the Middle East, you have different working weeks. Some of our clients work on Sundays, so but we have a good team. We have a big team. We have great technology, so we have sort of scalable ways of doing it.
So, what drives growth in this business?
I think it is changing. So I think if you were to ask me that question even 2 years ago, I would say it's to do with the change or the transformation or the aspiration of the client, of the organization. So if they've got a new operation or they're expanding or they need to develop new skills or they need to make sure their productivity, their positivity is enabling them to keep up with their competitors, then these things would often trigger the sorts of interventions that we help our clients with. I think that's still true to a large extent, but I think what's changing a lot is what you were talking about earlier is to do with AI or to do with expectations from technology. So I think what we're doing a lot more of now is real-time decision support. So it used to be our deliverables would look like a PDF report, okay? And they would say, okay, this is Steve. We've assessed Steve. These are Steve's strengths. These are his areas for development. This is the sort of team or the certain type of colleague that he would thrive working with. These are the people or the situations that he might struggle with. That type of static report. Okay. And then either we or the client, sometimes if you're looking at large numbers of people, you'd have to do a lot of spreadsheet work or a lot of PowerPoint work and say, okay, now we need to match that with your strategic objective.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what's happening now is we're focusing a lot more on the data, and our technology is providing a lot more of sort of dashboard report. So Steve can access his results straight away because that's actually when Steve is most interested in them and they're most relevant, and not in 2 weeks' time when you can schedule for a coach or someone to give him feedback. You're interested, like as soon as you finish the last question, you want to know, okay, what does this say about me? We can add lots of AI layers to that to help you to implement it or to understand it. And then for the organization, we now provide much more sort of dynamic dashboard type of report. So if, I don't know, the CFO leaves this afternoon and the CEO calls the CHRO and says, okay, who are the internal candidates for this role? You can come up with an answer, right? It doesn't have to be something where you say, well, let me just check my filing cabinet or let me put a PowerPoint together for you and get back to you later on this week or next week or something, right? Like you can actually do that type of matching within the platform that we have. We have our own platform called Lighthouse, and it really sort of helps you to match individuals or match teams to certain tasks or to certain ventures or aspirations that the organization might have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So instead of providing individual reports for individuals, you now operate this platform for your customers, clients, and then they can look up the people that are involved in changes. So
Yeah.
how is it different to scale the business with this type of approach? What makes it
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
complex?
No. Yeah. So on the one hand, I think it can help us a lot as our own organization because we can be much more pervasive 24 hours a day, all across the different time zones that we operate. You know, if you're our client, you don't always have to rely on having a meeting or a call with us in person. You can go and find that answer yourself. It's quite an intuitive sort of process and platform, and you access and get value from your own data. And I think that's the key thing that I'm trying to emphasize that's changed. I think clients now are impatient with SaaS platforms in particular, where they're not able to access their own data directly. So I think there's a little bit of sort of disintermediation going on in the enterprise software business as a whole. So that's the key trend that I'm trying to highlight here. But it also helps us to be more scalable. Just to take a step back to the previous discussion about AI, I think when it comes to using AI in your business, I think the key strategic choice is what are you not going to use AI for?
Mm-hmm.
So for us, we made the choice actually 3-4 years ago that we're not going to use AI in the assessments itself. Not
Mm-hmm.
today. Maybe in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, we might change our mind, and we're constantly reviewing that. But we need these defensible assessments, right? We need to be able to say this is fair and objective, and we're coming with an external point of view that is transparent and is defensible in every sort of sense of that word.
Yeah, you don't want to hallucinate assessments for clients or even run the risk of that happening. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some companies that have done that, right? I mean, there's lots of cases you can find where companies have said, hey, we just need a 5-minute video and I can tell you everything you need to know about this person and you can make decisions about their career and all sorts of stuff, right? I'm not saying we won't get there in the future, but I just don't think that's good enough at the moment. And I think a lot of things that you do with chatbots now, I think if you're judicious about it, you might be able to say, well, actually, that's interesting, but it's not good enough, right? It's not finished product. It's not something that I can execute on. What we can do is we can add a lot of value around the assessment. So we can do things like have AI-based development planning, right? So we can say to someone when they want to see their results, and people normally want to see their results almost immediately after they've finished their assessments, then you can start to, in the flow of work in the client's environment, whatever their learning partners are or their sort of learning architecture is, you can say, okay, here's a development plan for you, customized and curated within that environment for your strengths how to emphasize them, and then also for any sort of development areas or new learnings that you want to address. We can do things like have AI-based proctoring, right? So we can do things that sort of give the client a risk report, okay, on an application to say, how genuine is this? What other software does Steve have open on his laptop? Is there a shadow in the room? Where is his eyes going? Is he looking at someone else? Is he getting a help for someone else? Is this really Steve? Right? Like all these sorts of things, right? We can do that. So there's lots of things that we can do. We can develop customized case studies for the organization around the tasks and the challenges that organization has. So you can come up with very, very specific job related assessments. So all of these things AI can add a lot of value to, and they can provide a bigger scale and a bigger sort of ability to sustain our growth. But the core of what we do today, we're saying, look, no, like you need to be able to trust us. And we want to be able to show you the answer. If you have a question about any of our assessments, we can check, and there's an audit trail, and we can show you the answer. It's not just the computer came up with this idea.
So
We don't know.
intellectual property, and you know that it works, and you're sticking with it. You don't allow AI to bastardize it, basically. Which makes sort of sense. So, David, what is one thing that you're actively trying to figure out in your business right now?
That's a great question. I mean, there's lots of things. I think a lot of them come around, what is this threshold between what we do as humans and what we use AI or other technology to help us to do? And I think that threshold is constantly being reviewed. A lot of it is to do with, how do you make growth sustainable? We have had massive growth in the last 5-6 years, and that's a great thing. But I think it means you have to make sure the foundations of your organization are strong so that you can move one to another. I think I mentioned earlier that we're just starting to focus on North America as one of our new markets. And I was very keen that we didn't do that until this point or even next year, because I think we're not the organizational equivalent of the Beatles, right? Like we can't just expect to just sort of turn up in a big, sophisticated, very strong, highly cultured market and be able to just expect that we're going to be able to do things like we've done them everywhere else, or we don't need to think about how we communicate with those prospects and with those clients. So I think that's a really big step for us. And how we manage data, I think probably is the key thing. Fundamentally, if I was to come back to answer your question, I think it's how do we manage data? Because I think clients are becoming much more sophisticated, much more impatient with people who curate their data. They say, look, we know we're generating lots of data inside the organization, right? Which is typically what we do, right? It's people data. We can normally in most work environments, you can tell when somebody opens their laptop, or you can tell when they walk in the office door, or you can tell sometimes even what they're doing inside the working space, right? That their ID is got an RFID in it or something like that. So there's lots of data which is constantly being generated inside the organization. And I think clients want to get value from that data. And having a sort of third party proxy come in and say, hey, we can do your payroll for you, or we can send a questionnaire to people once a year, and that can let you know whether they understand health and safety or they're engaged in their workplace. It's not really sort of satisfactory anymore, right? The clients are saying, okay, I want to be able to get value from my data, and I want to be able to see that. I want the analytics. I want to ask questions that are not able to be prescribed at the beginning, and I want to be able to do these queries in real time.
So essentially, would that require you to get integrated with your clients to some degree so that you can real time process the data as it emerges?
I think it's really interesting, because I think what I'm hearing from my clients is they're actually frustrated with that. In the sort of classic SaaS world, which we've had in organizations now for 20, 30, maybe even longer, 40 years, you integrate, the big internal ERP types of systems or CRM systems, and you integrate them, and then you have to sort of work within their framework, right? And you might see a report which is already pre-programmed, but you don't necessarily see the data, right? And like if you wanted to say, okay, what's the trend today over the 24-hour clock, or how's it changing in June compared to May, or, you know, how does it relate to the temperature or whatever, right? You can come up with all these questions which you might not be able to predict and then plan and have a sort of pull down standard report. So to do that, you need access to the data. And I think, you know, clients are saying, like, this is our data. This data belongs to us. We want to be able to see that directly, and we want to be able to use that as a decision support tool and not necessarily just have a report.
Yeah. So they'd rather that they own the data and they apply your tools to your data without you necessarily having access to the data or something like that.
Yeah. I think it's also a source of differentiation for them, right? Because they know that if, you know, I'm not going to mention these companies. I'm sure, you know, you and all your viewers, you know the big brands. And it's interesting what's happening with their share price recently, right? They're all sort of maybe suffering a little bit from a decline in their share price on average. It's basically a standardized way of doing things, right? There's pretty much the same way that any corporation in any part of the world is going to do it, because this is the way that you get the efficiency through that software. But if an organization says, actually, we've got an insight into something which we think is unique and we think is differentiated, and that's what we want to make a decision in a slightly different way or make it faster, that's a point of competitive advantage, I think.
So does that mean that they wouldn't want you to be able to apply their idea to other customers because it's their unique property? So they would just want your tools to help them process their survey, but they don't want to share it with you.
Yeah, I think there are clients like that. We do deal with, you know, very sensitive industries and sometimes government departments where we have to be able to certify that type of approach. But I think that's likely to become more common in the future. I think as people become more sensitive and more aware of what is the value and the opportunity and the threat in terms of what can happen with their data.
Yeah, I mean, some people say that information is now ubiquitous. It's the questions that are really important, because that's how you come to apply. Maybe the question itself can be a proprietary know-how to ask the right kind of question. They don't want.
I mean,
I
agree. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think, again, to go back to assessments, right? We've recently released a whole bunch of assessments which are assessing skills in AI as a domain, right? So we've got all sorts of technical and non-technical AI assessments. And obviously one of the skills that we look at is prompt engineering, right? Because I think if you've used some of the generative AI platforms, you will always get an answer, right? They're always programmed to get an answer. And most of them are also pretty polite, and they sort of fluff up your ego a little bit and say, hey, great question. And that was really interesting. And they'll give you an answer, right? So you need to be aware of that, and you need to really probe and be able to make sure that, you know, you've not just got an answer, you've got the answer, right? Or the best answer that makes sense for you, and you've quality checked it. You know, you've taken it from one platform and you put it in another platform, and then you put it into a third platform, or whatever you've done. You need to have this awareness or these specific skills to be able to get the most value out of that. It's very dangerous, and I think we can all see, right? I mean, I'm sure your inbox is like my inbox, right? Like you get emails from people, you think, okay, well, that's not an email from a person, right? It's a sort of bulleted point email that's not personal, it's not directed at you, and it's sort of hard to understand what does it mean in some ways, right?
Yeah, you're right. So David, who is the ideal customer for you that can most benefit from your solution?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I would say for me personally and professionally, I like clients who challenge us. I like clients who are asking questions that make us think in a different way, then are able to hopefully give them value and really answer that question, because I think that's important for us to develop. Yeah, clients who are looking for new insights or different foresights that help them in their business. This is what we're looking for. definitely the ones that are pushing the envelope to take us forward in terms of quality.
So if people are listening, this type of people are listening to the show and
Yes.
would like to learn more about what you do and how you might be able to help them, where should they go and where can they find out more?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find out through LinkedIn. So I'm David B. Jones on LinkedIn. There's a lot. David Jones, I think, is the most common name for a British man, more than John Smith. So there's a lot of us about, but you'll be able to find me, David B. Jones. You can obviously find us Mercer Assessments. You can find out more information from us. And through these channels, I'll be happy to answer any questions or provide more information.
Is there a website that people should check out? Do you have like a separate website for Mercer Assessment?
We do, yeah. So Mercer Assessments, as part of the mercer.com website, is our domain where you'll find more information. There are also a number of books that we've published on particular subjects to do with assessment and talent and leadership development more generally. These are all available on Amazon as well.
Okay, so if you're out there and you're looking to have a more sophisticated view of your people and their aspirations and how they fit the type of work that you want them to do, and you like to understand more deeply, then check out Mercer Assessment, David B. Jones. Actually, it's easy to just put in David Jones Mercer and David will pop up that way. Check out the books that David and his colleagues published. And if you enjoyed this conversation, then make sure you follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and wherever you get your podcast. David, thanks for coming to the show and sharing your experience and insights. I mean, it seems to me that you have a much more nuanced approach than most talent assessment or performance assessment organizations, and you have a lot more tools at your disposal. It's a combination of technology and professional expertise. So that's fascinating. So thanks for coming on the show. And if you enjoyed, make sure you follow us because we come out every week with exciting entrepreneurs like David.
I will. Thank you, Steve.
That's it for this episode. Keep moving your business forward. Subscribe at stevebreda.com/newsletter.